My name is Darren Corbier. I am Anishinaabe from Weequampong and on Manitoulin Island in Ontario. I am the creator of the Truth and Reconciliation board games. So there's an original, kind of like an adult game. So this is the elementary version of the Truth and Reconciliation game. So it's slightly different from the original. The game board here is Turtle Island. Represented, and it's double-sided. So this has 16 spaces, for example, and it's for the 3-4 classes. And then on the other side, it's for the higher grades, so 5, 6, 7, 8, and it has 20 spaces. We always have the church and the crown in the game. All we do is put them in little stands, and we put them up in the corners here. So pre-colonial map of Canada. And it's just divided into, geographic regions like the mountains, the plains, the East Coast. This is a fresh game. Yeah. So you would set the crown up in the corner.
My name is Bonnie Norton. I'm a professor in the Department of Language and Literacy Education at UBC. Part of what I do is to work with an amazing team at UBC. But it's also been a complete delight to learn Darren Corbier's board game on truth and reconciliation.
The group in the elementary version of the game, the group has to earn 4 eagle feathers before the church and the crown take all of your land, language, culture, and identity. So that is accomplished by circling Turtle Island, and every time you pass the eastern door, you earn an eagle feather. And what we do is we position the eagle feathers. Every time we earn one, we position an eagle feather in between, and then that sort of shields the energy between those two forces. So one of the other favorite things is the guidebook. This basically gives you the rules. The pages are color coded, so you have green pages, blue pages, and orange pages, and each of those sections of the book are broken down according to the decks of cards. All of these are described in detail in the guidebook, and then the front of the guidebook is just the background information and some general rules. Oh, and here's a character that I think we'll all learn to love. His name is Joe, stuck in the past, and he's the guy that you don't want to be like. So hopefully at the end of the game, you're no longer like Joe. This is a more of a cooperative effort. It's us against the crown and the church, and we're trying to survive the colonization process. This is our land, our language, and our identity, and what we're trying to do is prevent the church and the crown from taking it all from us. These here are the 4 different categories of cards that are in each of these decks. So there are 3 different decks, one for the 3-4, grade 3-4, grade 5-6, and then grade 7-8. And each one on one of them is worded differently, appropriate for the grade level. So the Stataha cards are, in essence, a reason to celebrate, maybe an act of resistance. You won at the bingo kind of thing. TTnR is more of an expression of disappointment. So it's talking about some of the less than stellar things that the church and the government or church and the crown have done in the past. The Indian Act is all about the Indian Act, as confusing as it is for us. It makes it even more confusing for settlers to try and understand, but hopefully this will help to try to clarify some of the confusion. And then there are assimilation cards. These are true, false, or multiple guess. Based on how many players you have, you would set out your land, language, culture, and identity. And then the crown and the church, for example, if you have to surrender land, then it goes and it stacks up in front of the crown. To choose a color, everybody starts on the eastern door, and you roll the die, and you just move around. And as you move around, you land on the space, you draw that corresponding card. So for example, if you land on an assimilation space, then you draw an assimilation card. The student who draws the card reads the card to everybody else, and then that way you're listening to one of your peers talking about Canadian history. So there's an historical fact, and we're talking about how that fact may have impacted on Indigenous people, and it's typically in the loss of land, language, culture, or identity. The map starts out like this. And when as you lose your currency, so you lose all your language, then you take the blue piece and you flip it over. You lose all of your identity. Your identity would go to the church. Your language would probably go to the church. And you flip that piece of the map over. You lose all of your land, which goes to the crown. You flip the green over. And then you take your culture, you lose your culture, and you flip that piece over. And then you end up with a map of Canada on a grayscale, again, with featuring all of the residential schools with the red crosses, and then the capitals.
Wow, you know, there are so many ways in which one can use this game. Of course, the heart of the game is about truth and reconciliation. So for many of those settlers like myself and others, we have a lot to learn. But what is so wonderful about the game is that you're learning in a spirit, in a sense of humility. I think the game encourages that kind of approach. So it's about learning about oneself, but learning about others and moving forward together. It's inspiring. It's absolutely inspiring. I want to also say that the quality is so great. I mean, if you just have a look at it, I can imagine kids sitting around playing this game, but it's not, of course, only for kids. It's very much for youth and certainly for adults.
I was a high school teacher back in Sault Ste. Marie, working for the Algoma District School Board. And it was the May long weekend when I was getting my students ready for exams that I put a prototype game together. Initially, they were just it was just the cheat sheet that evolved into a bunch of recipe cards for flashcards.
Yeah.
And then from there, I designed the board, 4 sections with 7 little spaces in each section. So you had 28 spaces going around in the form of Turtle Island. And it wasn't until much later that I added actual names to the different categories. Went to a teachers conference in Nelson, Canada, saw the prototype and they liked it. Yeah. And so I began adding elements of my artwork to the game to make it look as it appears today.
If I could say what is the greatest strength of this,
Yep.
It was the discussions that we all had.
Yes, yeah.
That was what was so exciting.
Yeah.
It was learning from those little cards in a supportive context. And that's why I think it's so fantastic, for teaching purposes, because you're learning, but in the context of collegial conversation. How many conversations can we have about identity?
Yeah.
What do we mean by that?
Yeah.
And how does that change? Your identity changes as you play this game.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're learning and you're shifting and you're rethinking a little bit how you relate to this world and this wider world.
We try to stick with the identity as in terms of how the Indian Act defines Indigenous people, whether you're status, non-status, male, female, right? So it adds to the confusion.
Land, identity, culture, and language. I mean,
Yep.
These are so connected,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they operate in the game in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And you identify that and you enable us to look at the relationship between them.
I'm really surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised, I guess, at how good the game is going. That was never my intent, so I'm I'm happy that it's taken off the way it has. Yeah, for sure.
How to prepare students appropriately for this game, because I would want them to have some knowledge. Also, of course, the game itself, they're going to be learning in the process of actually engaging. Depending on the level, we would be doing some reading. And of course, in any class, there will be both settlers and Indigenous students. So we'd have to think about what makes sense in terms of as students working together. And then we definitely would want to have reflection. And of course, it's never going to be right the first time. But you learn from each time you play, you learn. And of course, as you get to know the cards, you get to know the answers as well, right? Mm-hmm. I think this game helps you get there. So
when I first created the game, my audience was my grade 10. I had grade 10 students, mostly young men from the res.
Yes.
Whose functional literacy was probably at a 5-6 level.
Okay.
Right? And so even though they were in grade 10,
yes,
they were still struggling to communicate, in a written format. So I used as much visual aid as I possibly could, like a graphic novel, for example, to help get the learning across to them.
And of course, that's also going to be helpful for people, for example, who are new to Canada and are needing to learn English, right?
And elders. So if we even our Indigenous elders, in their 70s, 60s, 70s, their language skills, their written language skills, their communication skills may not necessarily be very good. So for them to play this and learn about their own history.
Essential argument is there. The essential facts are there.
Yep. Its simplest, common denominator, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're going to get your games, get them through me. Like, send me a message.
Okay.
I make more of a profit that way as opposed to going through the publisher.
I want to invite him to UBC and to teach our students who are teachers about this fantastic game, and hopefully make sure it has wide distribution. Thank you.